Good morning. I'm not Kerry. I'm Joanna Phillips from the EMG Planning Committee, and I'm very proud and happy to see the second instance of Tech Focus taking place at the Hirshhorn Museum. We are opening the program with our first speaker, Kerry Brougher, who will introduce us to the medium from a curatorial perspective. Kerry Brougher is the Deputy Director and Chief Curator at this museum. Before moving to Washington, Mr. Brougher was the Director of the Museum of Modern Art in Oxford, England, and prior to that, a curator at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles. Mr. Brougher has organized retrospectives of the work of Hiroshi Sugimoto, Ed Ruscha, Jeff Wall, and Robert Irwin, among others, and thematic exhibitions such as The Cinema Effect, Visual Music, Open City Street Photographs since 1950s, Hall of Mirrors, Art and Film since 1945, and Notorious, Alfred Hitchcock, and Contemporary Art. He was the co-artistic director of the 2004 Gwangju Biennial. His most recent exhibition was a retrospective of the work of Yves Klein, which received a first-place award from the Association of International Art Critics. He recently worked with artist Doug Aitken on the major film commission that you can see projected out on the exterior wall of the Hirshhorn Museum after 8 o'clock, I think, and is organizing an exhibition of the theme of art and destruction. Kerry Brougher, welcome.
We'll get to this sooner or later.
Yep. I just want to get you the proper image.
This is one reason not to go completely digital.
Yeah, I know. We're going to do this while I do this. Sorry, Kerry. I had this set up just right for you.
Well, okay. While Jeff is doing that, I want to say something. Susan showed that sequence from Mad Men, and I just wanted to say it was fantastic with the word carousel, because when I had to write about the Doug Aitken piece for the book that we did for Song 1, which is the Doug Aitken work, the word that kept coming up over and over again when I was trying to write the essay was the word carousel, because I kept thinking about it as a carousel going around. I tore most of that out of the essay after Doug read it and said he didn't like the word carousel. But I took it out, but I kept thinking about these carousel ideas moving around. And ultimately, you know, the piece is so high-tech out there, and everyone keeps asking about the digital projection, and there's 11 digital projectors shooting around, and yet, because it's digital, Doug actually thought while he was editing it that it was just 7 screens. So screen no longer equals the projector itself, which is a huge change from analog, right, where you had a projector that was the screen. So 7 screens equals 11 projectors. It doesn't compute. But it was a very odd experience because Doug hates the fact that it was all done digitally, and hates to talk about anything that was digital about it, because he too comes out of film and actually loves film. Anyway, I had to throw that in because it reminded me your Mad Men sequence. I want to take it just a little bit this morning from the position of a curatorial position, and I guess I'm a little bit biased to begin with, because one of my degrees is in film from UCLA, and so I have a great love myself for the medium of film, and I regret very much that we're starting to see film disappear, but I guess particularly 16 millimeter right now. But I want to take it from a curatorial perspective and from the position that what's the most important aspect to a curator is having choices, having the choice of presenting something as film or presenting it in other ways if that seems appropriate. I'd actually like to start today by showing a film. It's a work called Report by Bruce Conner, some of you may be familiar with. It's a work that we've just acquired into the collection. This is not a version you're going to see, is not a restored version. The film, to me, I don't know, we acquired this for the collection, and to me, Report is one of the seminal works of the 20th century. I mean, for me, it's one of the great artworks, let alone great film works of the 20th century. I don't need to go into a whole lot about how it was made. You all know how Conner reassembles footage, how he uses montage effects, how it's sort of his idea of assemblage transferred into film. Or vice versa, how in the tragic moments of the film he begins to intercut between the black and white frames, reduces it down to the basic unit of filmmaking, and uses that in a way that is incredibly powerful. This is a work that really, you know, to me, it can be shown as a DVD. It can be shown electronically. It doesn't quite work because the frames don't match up. Electronically, the 24 frames a second don't match up with the frames in video. It's got a complete reliance on the film medium at its core. It is all about film making. It's all about the reassembly. It's about editing. It's about Eisensteinian montage. It's about Hollywood-type seamless montage, exposed. And it's about footage that we probably all saw on television. I remember seeing it. I was young, but I remember it very well, seeing this footage on television. But it's transferring the footage that you saw on television that seemed somehow very immediate and very much a part of the world to a kind of otherworldliness in the film itself, to a kind of American nightmare, which only film, I think, could really give it that kind of sense of nightmare. There's a lot of great filmmakers, great artists, who have used the film medium in ways that, if we just had a video or digital technology, could not have quite worked the same. Stan Brakhage, being able to paste moth wings right on celluloid. His use of flares, his use of grain, his use of flicker effects, scratches as part of the film medium itself in Prelude, Dog Star Man, or other films. His use, like many before him, Harry Smith or Len Lai, of painting right on celluloid itself, which becomes a very material kind of thing and creates this absolutely beautiful illuminated type of film. Other artists who used flicker effects, of course, Tony Conrad in his movie The Flicker. I love this warning, by the way, that you might suffer an epileptic fit if you actually watch the film, which turns out not to be true at all because it doesn't go rapidly enough to cause one, but he put it in anyway. Peter Kubelka, who also has done a number of flicker-type films, the first being Arnold Reiner would be probably the first flicker film, but it's also a musical score. As you can see, the basic unit of filmmaking, the frame, reduced down to kind of a series of notes, much like a Schoenbergian type of score. Or Paul Scherentz, which I believe you all spoke about maybe at Tech Focus 1, if I remember right. I may be wrong about that, but this is a work that we actually acquired in the collection called Shutter Interface, and it's all about flicker effects as well, but now it's about color, and it's about sound, it's about synesthesia and relationships between them. But it's not, oh, and then Andy Warhol, the whole idea of holding on a shot, of seeing the grain in the film, of feeling the expectations that a film is supposed to move on, that it's supposed to cut, that it's supposed to go somewhere, but it works as a film because it works against what the expectations are of a film. It doesn't go anywhere. It becomes almost like a painting. But going backwards, the effects of film, what would Carl Dreyer's Vampire have been like if, you know, you had had fast film in those days? I mean, the film emulsions were very slow. It created effects. Putting gauze also over the lens didn't hurt that as well. But the effects that you could achieve with film were really quite amazing. And I suppose you can redo some of these effects digitally now. To me, they don't look quite the same, and also they actually came out of the medium itself. The effects wouldn't be there unless there had been the effects in the medium itself. The same with von Sternberg's Shanghai Express, or William Dieterle and Max Reinhardt's Midsummer Night's Dream. And of course, Greg Toland's work for deep focus in Citizen Kane, and the deep black cavernous shadows that you get in works like Citizen Kane at the time, a kind of blackness that maybe only recently digital technology is able to approach. Or the three-strip Technicolor processes of The Wizard of Oz or other films of the time that have a kind of saturated color that's really, I feel, still unattainable in any other medium. And I might just mention now, I know this is off the subject a little, but I might just mention the loss of the cathode ray tube at the same time, which has a kind of effervescent glow to it and a kind of color that is not obtainable with LCD screens or other recent forms of television screens. Or the way that Jack Cardiff shot and used Technicolor in films like The Red Shoes. Or moving up more closely in time, the Corman Poe series, Nicholas Roeg's way of shooting kind of hallucinogenic color in Mask of the Red Death, or Floyd Crosby's, one of the great cinematographers of all time, who's not well known, in The Pit and the Pendulum by Roger Corman, as well. Amazing uses of color. Or the way Dario Argento uses color in his horror film series from Italy, such as Suspiria from 1977. Tacitidine. Susan mentioned Tacitidine, and I just wanted to show this image. She just did a major work at the Tate called Film. And it's a piece which is an homage to the film medium and to the worry that she has of the film medium disappearing. It was done with 35 millimeter film and is projected. And, you know, I wanted to just kind of show this image and say a little bit about this idea that dates back to 1933 and the philosopher Rudolf Arnheim, who said he warned against going against the ongoing attempts at the time to bring the film medium closer and closer to a complete film, to cave into the demand for being as true to nature as possible. He also conceded at the time that that was going to happen no matter what, and of course it did happen. 3D, Cinerama, CinemaScope, 70 millimeter film, all his predictions came true, stereophonic sound as well. And now, of course, we have digital technology, which can surpass all these others and create a completely virtual world. But even so, it seems to me that like one medium really shouldn't necessarily displace the other medium. In a way, photography has not killed painting. Movies didn't destroy radio. Television did not mean the end of cinema. And so one hopes that the distinctive characters of film will be kept and the choices for curators to show things in film or digital will be kept. If film is made up of a kind of persistence of vision, I hope that we continue this persistence of cinematic vision and have the choices necessary to make the right choices to show things in the right way from the curatorial perspective. Thank you.
We actually have some time allotted after each talk for Q&As, so if you do have a question for Mr. Brougher, then this is the time to ask him. Maybe I have a small question if nobody else has one. When you decided to acquire the Bruce Conner piece for your collection recently, did you have the conversation with the artist whether or not in the future, when film will be a medium very hard to keep? Did you have that conversation if the work should no longer be shown?
Actually, not in this case, because unfortunately Bruce died a couple of years ago.
Oh right, sorry.
We were actually in the middle of working with him a little bit on a project. We were doing an exhibition called The Cinema Effect, and we had a couple of his films in that show. One of which was Take the 510 to Dreamland. That part of the show was all about dreaming and falling asleep. And he has a beautiful film that's all about that. And we had worked with him. He had changed his mind over time about the way his films could be presented. He pretty much was a stickler for having them presented as real film. He did allow them to be seen in gallery settings. They could be on a loop projector, but he preferred them to be on a loop projector and to be seen as actual film. I believe the estate has changed that slightly since his death. And he did go back and forth with it a little bit at the end himself. He made a new film at the very end in which he incorporated footage from some past films and actually allowed that to be put on to DVD. So it was a little bit of an ambivalent relationship I think he had with digital technology. A little more ambivalent than, say, Stan Brakhage, who has pretty much refused in a museum setting or a theater setting to allow his films to be shown as anything but film, although he did release through Criterion a very beautiful edition of his films, but it's only for home viewing, as I understand it. So unfortunately with Bruce, we were unable to have that conversation, which points out that one should have these conversations as much as you possibly can while the artist is still alive. How do you want your film, preserved? Even if it's a film it's a video, even if it's done on digital technology, what happens when the platforms change? Do you want those to change with it? And do you want the old projectors used? Should we be buying a lot of the old type of projectors, or is it okay to migrate it to something else? These are questions that I think, the conservation staff faces every day and that curators need to be involved with in terms of interviewing the artists.
Thank you. Does anybody else have a question? Yes, please.
Sure.
I had a question about what you meant by only film can describe an American nightmare. And then I also want to say to everybody that you can tweet to TF2, hashtag TF2. So everything that I've been recording is on TF2, so please, if you're tweeting or anything, definitely do that.
Well, I don't know. It's probably going too far what I said, I will admit. But I think, for me, there's something about the film medium, sitting in the darkened theater space, seeing the grain of it, seeing the way it works as a projection, which somehow took what was originally on a television set in your living room and turned it into a mass nightmare some way, that it turned it into something darker and more powerful than what you could simply get in your living room on a television set. And sitting in the dark, watching those flicker effects take place that Conner used, or even watching the footage, using the techniques of cinema to cut a sequence over and over again, keep repeating it to the point where it starts to get on your nerves because, Jacqueline Kennedy cannot get the door open on the car. She can't get it open, and then she can't get it open again, and then she can't get it open again, and then there's a mirror image of her later, and she can't get the door open from the other side as well, flipping that image over and doing that, which is something that, if you're editing on a moviola, you would have the idea of doing that. And so I think this whole idea to me just puts this into such a kind of place that it couldn't go if it had been done on video. Yes?
Given your comment about the dark theater space for this film in particular, I'm wondering if you would ever show it in a gallery, and especially since the artist isn't available, how you as a curator would come to that decision.
Yeah, we actually are allowed to show this film electronically in a darkened space in a gallery. I think I would only do it, I would prefer to do it as film in a space, rather this particular one. I might make an exception on some of the other films, but this one in particular I think is extremely strong as film. And to also have the apparatus, the cinematic apparatus there, churning away with the sound of the projector at the same time, I think I almost lost that today. I almost wanted that to come out of the room back there and to hear the whirring of the motors and the gears in the projector, because when Connor generally showed his films, he actually showed them in galleries a lot. He showed them in theaters too, but he showed them in galleries most of the time at the beginning of his career. And he'd be having a show, for example, of his assemblages, and he would actually, then one evening they would show the films in the gallery, and of course the 16mm projector was always sitting right there and was kind of part of it, like it is for the Paul Sherritt's piece, maybe not quite so much as with Paul Sherritt's, but it was always part of it. I think this particular case, I might consider DVD, I'd have to see it, but I think that, or off of a hard drive, it might look okay. Jeff and I have had some conversations about that, and I think we'd have to experiment with it and see if it was as effective that way. But I think it would work well as a loop projector in a gallery space. And we have shown a movie, one of his other great films, that way on a loop projector in a gallery space. And I think we've done that one actually also on a DVD, if I remember right. It looked pretty good actually. So I would consider it, yes. This is one of those cases where we don't quite know what the artist had in mind. I would not show a Stan Brakhage that way, because I know he was dead set against doing things that way. But then again, of course, you wonder, as technology progresses and things get better, some of these artists began to change their minds after a while. You know, when it was just video, they refused to put it on video to begin with. When digital technology first came out, they refused to do that. And as it got better and better, some of them actually started to get one over. And some of them don't care at all. You take an artist like Anthony McCall, who started out doing installations with film, and he has circled a line describing a cone, which is done when you're supposed to be smoking in a gallery of all the people who showed up and smoked, and it was a line describing a cone in the gallery, so you could see the projector, the white image cutting across, and the actual cone of white light coming from the projector. He has no problems now using a digital technology to create that cone of white light, or in any other forms that he's been producing. And he and Tass Dedeen had an argument at one point at Johns Hopkins, I remember, about this, because she was adamant that you had to stick with film, and he said, oh, come on, we're moving on. Stop living in the past. So it's interesting to hear the differences between the two. And those are two completely different artists. And Tacita works still so much with serendipity. Her films are often shot completely by chance, what happens. So she's much closer to the sort of medium, feeling the medium itself, than he is, which is a more intellectual approach, I think. So it varies from artist to artist. It's a really good question.
Thank you. Oh, one last question, please, and then we have to move on.
I'm actually a biologist from across the mall, but I just have to ask this question. It just strikes me that Bach wouldn't have necessarily wanted things played on a piano as opposed to a harpsichord, but it doesn't make it any less relevant to play it both ways. And I hate to think that these art forms are going to disappear just because we don't have the technology to play them anymore, the older technologies. And one of the great things about great art is that it transcends time. And I think these things should too.
Well, thanks. That's a really good thing. I mean, I think that the whole point, if nothing else, is that, you know, that we should still have the ability to show these things in the proper way if we want to. We should still have film if we want to show report as film. We should still have a cathode ray tube if we want to show early Bruce Nauman videos, you know, as they were meant to be seen, or Nam June Paik the way it was meant to be seen. And you know, the complete loss of these things that's the disaster. I mean, that's the real tragedy if these things just completely disappear. The slide medium, if James Coleman's work, you know, if slides completely disappear, well, I guess they already kind of have. And, you know, how are we going to show some of those great pieces by James Coleman that were made specifically for the carousel, and even a specific type of carousel that had a certain sound to it? So anyway, thank you.
Thank you.